It's been exactly 3 years since Officer John O'Keefe was killed. And if you don't know his name off the top of your head, you're likely not alone. You see, many people remember the name Karen Read, but far fewer know the man she's accused of murdering. But on this show, we remember the victim in this case, Boston police officer John O'Keefe. And what better way to do that than to hear from John's best friend, Brendan Kane. What you're about to hear is part of an interview from an episode of M. William Phelps's podcast, 34 Fairview Road.
What did he talk about, growing up that he wanted to be, that he wanted to do? Did he have plans, or was he just kind of riding the wave?
Growing up, Johnny always wanted to be a police officer. That was always his goal. As early as junior high, I would say that seed was planted. He was laser focused on achieving that goal.
Was that a family thing? Was he following the blue blood of the family?
Yeah, his grandfather was a police officer. I think that's really the genesis of the goal, but it was something that was definitely related to his family.
And now we're so pleased to welcome on the show M. William Phelps. He's a New York Times best-selling author. He consulted for the show Dexter. He was also the writer and executive producer for the #1 true crime podcast franchise, Paper Ghosts. And he's here to tell us a little bit more about the friends of John O'Keefe's that he interviewed. And I'm going to call him Matt for our interview. M. William Phelps, wonderful having you on the show. And I'll call you Matt as we talk. Thank you for coming on to talk about this. As you know, this is an important day for the O'Keefe family, and you learned a lot about John as you went on this endeavor to tell the real story of what happened the night that he was killed. What did you take away from what his friends shared with you?
Well, the first thing I would say about today is that I just want to acknowledge that it's a rough day for the family, obviously, and I don't speak for the family, but I can just imagine. John O'Keefe, I didn't know a lot about John when I went into this, and talking to people who knew him very personally, I just got the idea that he was just this happy guy who everybody loved. He was a very positive guy. And what struck me was how selfless he was. Remember, his sister dies, and then 2 months later, his brother-in-law dies. And so John takes his niece and nephew and raises them. And that right there, I think, tells you all you need to know about who John O'Keefe is. That he gave up his bachelorhood, if you will, and in part, as you hear in the podcast, he gave up basically his career goals, to take a more 9-to-5 job in the police department so he could be there for the children. Right,
Matt. A hero in more ways than one. A hero putting his life on the line every day for the people in his community, and also stepping in to be that hero for his niece and nephew at home after the passing of their parents. Tell me,
sure,
when you think about what his legacy is, what do you think it is, please, Matt?
Unfortunately, right now, it's hard to talk about legacy because what we're involved in right now is, and I think by nature, murder trials become about the defendant, right? I mean, that's just what happens. We're reporting on the case and the defendant is on trial. However, John's legacy should be of a guy who gave of himself to everybody around him. I mean, there was not one person I spoke to, and I spoke to a lot of people who had anything bad to say about this guy. Generally, when I interview about murder victims or victims in general, I can always find one or two people, but in this case, John was just so well liked by everybody because he was that guy. And in some of the videos of 3 years ago last night, we can see as he walks into the Waterfall Bar, we can see him put up his hands like this to go hug people and smile. I mean, that's the kind of guy that he was. He was this guy that, people felt comfortable around. He made you feel comfortable. He loved, and he was loved by so many. And I hate to see what this has become about, I've never seen a murder victim or his family dehumanized like I have seen in this case. And that is just, a very sad part of all of this.
Right, Matt. And thank you for mentioning that. It's stunning, it's sickening, and you're right. It's like nothing we've ever seen. I mean, you are very well known and very highly regarded in the true crime community. You've been there for many years. Some may say you've seen it all. You've written about it all. You've won awards. And then you see this. And I remember just being shocked, like I couldn't believe my eyes that his family was being attacked by mobs of people who support the defendant. In what world does this work out?
It baffles the mind. It really does. I could not believe, and I apologize for laughing, but it's laughable. I could not believe this when I started getting into this. When I started to look at the amount of just video that's out there of what these people have done to not only John O'Keefe's immediate family, his mother and father and brother, but all the players involved, the witnesses, how they were mocked and yelled at and screamed as they walked into the courtroom to testify in a murder trial. Some of the names, the vulgar names that Peggy O'Keefe, John's mother, has been called. I don't understand what that gets anybody by doing that, by dehumanizing, again, the victim's family. I mean, right. This woman lost her daughter and then her son.
Right.
And she's called names on the way into the courtroom to support the prosecution of the person she believes is responsible for her son's murder. Which is anybody's right? So it really boggles the mind.
It does. And I encourage everyone to listen to 34 Fairview Road. It is excellent. You have no horse in this race, and something that you definitely bring up in your podcast and had uncovered as you really got into this was that defendant Karen Read isn't condemning any of this by these supporters of her. She's not condemning the horrible attacks in person, online, on her boyfriend's family members and loved ones. Her boyfriend who was killed, her boyfriend who's the victim, and the family who's now victims. What does that say to you?
I mean, Julie, that is such an excellent point you bring up. This could all be stopped, or could have been stopped right away if Karen Read, who said she loved John, right? Karen Read, her attorneys came out and said, listen, stop it. Everybody just stop this, okay? Let us defend Karen, and you keep your mouth shut about the victim and the victim's families. But nobody ever did that. In fact, as Brendan Kane, John's best friend, says in episode 10 there in the podcast, he says, Karen Read, in fact, did the opposite. She and he uses the word dehumanize, where, if you listen to some of the tape, she calls John a buffalo on a prairie, his dead body. She never comes out and says how sorry she is, or shows any empathy, emotion, which is striking to me. It just, it became all about her.
Right.
It became all about her, and that's the sad part of this. And I just I'm baffled every day that I pick up the newspaper or turn on, social media, which I try to stay off of.
Right. You're a smart man. Well, you're a busy man too, man. Not like you have time for all of that. You're busy podcasting, winning awards, all of that. And to kind of put a button on it, and we'll talk more as we get closer to trial. As you said, and as John's friends noted, not only is defendant Karen Read not condemning this disgusting behavior and these attacks, but it raises a question, well, how did all this originate? How did all of this get get started. You know, she's not stopping it, but, you know, that's a conversation for another day, isn't it? Isn't it, Matt? We'll talk some more. Everybody, listen to his podcast. We are out of time. 34 Fairview Road. And also, that's not the only one. My gosh, he's got Crossing the Line. And then his #1 true crime podcast, Paper Ghosts. So be sure to check all of that out. Matt, we will have you back very soon. Thank you for everything. And thank you for sharing, most importantly, the legacy of John O'Keefe that you've learned through your investigative work, that it's one of giving, that he was a selfless man and officer.
Yes,
and he gave to everyone every single day.
And he didn't take.
Right.
He only
That's
gave.
rare. What a gem of a human being. And we're going to continue to remember him on this show as he's what this case is about. M. William Phelps, we'll see you soon. Thank you for everything this morning.
Thank you, Julie.
And my
Thanks for
friends at
having
home,
me.
of course, want to let you know that if you're interested in the next pretrial date before Karen Reed's second murder trial, it's going to be on Friday. We know that the prosecution is making a motion to the court. They've already filed it to exclude the defense's cell phone expert. Why? Because the cell phone company, Celebrate, has said that it would have been impossible for Jennifer McCabe to have Googled how long to die in the cold at 2:27 a.m., that it happened at 6:30 a.m. So they're trying to exclude that expert, and we expect to hear arguments from both sides about it on Friday before Judge Cannoni, and Court TV will be there with our cameras. Now, as we go to break, we want to remember the victim. We're being a voice for victims on this show always, and today especially, we want to remember Officer John O'Keefe. He served for 16 years in the community where he grew up in Boston. He had so much life ahead of him, and he was gone far too soon. We thank him for his service and his legacy of giving. We'll be right back.
She thinks I'm gonna kill her, and then I want to kill her.